Imagine trusting someone so completely that they become an extension of your family, your most trusted ally in the world. Now, imagine that same person betrays that trust in the most unforgivable way, breaking the one bond that should have never been touched. What if the person who did this to your family was the very man you worked for, the man who paid your bills, the man you thought you could trust? This is the story of a mother, an ordinary woman, living an ordinary life until one fateful discovery shattered everything. Her daughter, a mere 16 years old, was the victim of a betrayal so dark, so horrific, that it forced a mother to make a choice no one should ever have to make. What would you do if you learned that the man you worked for had crossed a line that could never be undone? A line that broke not only your heart, but your spirit as well. Would you seek justice? Or would you take matters into your own hands, knowing the consequences could be far worse than anyone could imagine? In tonight's story, a mother makes an unforgivable decision, a decision that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. Stay with me as we uncover the shocking truth behind this tragic crime and the deadly path a woman took, driven by a love no one could understand. It was a quiet afternoon in the town of Chesterfield, a picturesque neighborhood nestled in the suburbs of Manchester, England. A town where the sounds of children laughing and neighbors chatting echoed through the streets, where life seemed to unfold at a leisurely pace. But on this particular afternoon, the air was heavy, the skies painted in shades of gray, as if the clouds themselves were preparing for what was about to unfold. Wait, before you see this insane story, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. And if this video shocks you, trust me, it will. Smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because we drop even crazier videos every week, and you don't want to miss them. Few could have imagined that, hidden just a few streets away, a life was about to end in a brutal and shocking way. The kind of death that would leave the community reeling, asking themselves, how did this happen? In this seemingly idyllic setting, lived Benjamin Archer, a man who seemed to have it all. A businessman in his late 40s, Benjamin had earned the trust and admiration of everyone around him. Known for his success in the tech industry, he was a man of wealth, charisma, and power. His life was an open book, except for one dark chapter that no one would ever suspect. He was well liked, well respected, and built a name for himself in the community. But beneath that polished exterior, Benjamin carried a hidden secret, one that once exposed would change everything. It would lead to his end, in the most unimaginable way. Working for Benjamin was Elena Morales, a woman who had dedicated over a decade of her life to his family. A woman in her early 40s, Elena was known for her hard work, her unwavering loyalty, and the quiet dignity she brought to the household. She was more than just a housekeeper. She was the backbone of the home, the steady force that held it all together. Her relationship with Benjamin was one of mutual respect, or so it seemed. For years she had cleaned his house, prepared his meals, and like any trusted employee, had earned a place of trust within his inner circle. But Elena wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a mother too, and her greatest treasure, her daughter, Sofia Morales, was the light of her life. Sofia, just 16 years old, was a bright and intelligent teenager, full of ambition and hope for the future. She was the kind of girl who could charm anyone she met with a smile, whose presence lit up any room she entered. Elena often dreamed of a better future for her daughter, one where Sofia could rise above the struggles Elena had faced in her own life. But everything changed one evening, when Elena learned a truth so horrifying, it shattered her entire world. She walked into a room to find her daughter Sofia, with Benjamin Archer, in a position so compromising, so unthinkable, that it sent a shockwave through her soul. The truth hit Elena like a physical blow. Benjamin Archer, the man she had served loyally for so many years, the man she had trusted like family, had crossed the most unforgivable line. He had assaulted her daughter, and in that moment, a mother's rage ignited, burning with the intensity of 1,000 storms. The rage Elena felt was not just for her daughter, but for herself. The years of trust, loyalty, and sacrifice, torn apart in an instant. The man who had seemed like a pillar of strength, had instead turned into the monster she had never expected. This wasn't just betrayal, it was the deepest kind of violation. And now, Elena had a choice. Would she let the law take its course, or would she take matters into her own hands? She knew one thing for sure: Benjamin Archer would never again hurt her daughter. As the days passed, Elena's plan grew more precise, more calculated. She would wait for the right moment. She would be patient, just as she had been for all the years she had worked for him. But this time, there would be no mercy. The trust Benjamin had so easily taken for granted was about to cost him everything. This is a story of betrayal, of trust shattered beyond repair. It's a story of a mother driven to the brink by a father's unforgivable actions. And it's a story of a woman who would stop at nothing to ensure that justice in her eyes would be served. For months, Elena Morales had sensed something was off. At first it was subtle, an occasional tension in the air when Benjamin Archer would come home from his business trips. A strange look exchanged between him and Sophia, a fleeting moment of discomfort that seemed too innocent to question. But the more Elena observed, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She had seen Benjamin act differently around Sophia, more affectionate than he had been in the past, offering gifts and compliments that seemed out of place. And Sophia, oh Sophia, the girl who had once been so bright, so full of life, now carried a distant sadness in her eyes, as if a part of her had been taken, something she wasn't willing or able to share. But Elena dismissed her suspicions. She had known Benjamin for so long, and he had always treated her daughter like his own. Could she really be imagining things? After all, she had no proof. There was no reason to believe anything could be happening, until one fateful night. One evening, Elena returned home earlier than expected from the grocery store, her arms filled with bags of food. She opened the door, expecting the usual hum of the house, the clatter of the kitchen, the faint sound of Sophia humming as she worked on her school assignments. But instead, it was eerily quiet. The silence hung heavily in the air, thick with anticipation. Elena set the bags down and called out for Sophia, but there was no answer. Only a soft murmur from the living room. Her heart began to race. She cautiously walked toward the source of the sound. As she approached, Elena heard Sophia's voice, soft and trembling, as if speaking in broken words, and then Benjamin's voice, calm, almost soothing, as if trying to comfort her. But why? Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pressed herself against the wall outside the door, straining to listen. And then Elena heard it. The argument. It started as a soft murmur, but quickly escalated into something more heated, more frantic. Sophia was crying. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She could make out the words now, each one like a dagger to her heart. In that moment, Elena felt the world around her crumble. The truth was unbearable. Sophia, her precious daughter, the girl she had sacrificed everything for, had been the victim of the one person Elena had trusted most. Benjamin Archer was the one who had taken advantage of her daughter's innocence. The man she had worked for, the man she had once called a friend, had crossed the most unforgivable line. And it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the knowledge that she had been too blind to see it, too naive to question the man who had betrayed her in the most intimate way. Her mind raced, spinning in a whirl of conflicting thoughts. She wanted to confront him, to scream, to make him understand the pain he had caused. But she knew it wouldn't help. She had to think, to plan. And as the seconds dragged on, Elena realized that she could no longer turn a blind eye to what had happened. Something had to be done. From that moment on, everything changed. Elena's anger shifted from helplessness to cold, calculated resolve. She no longer saw Benjamin Archer as the man who had employed her for years. He was now the man who had destroyed her family. And a mother's love, when twisted by betrayal, can be far more dangerous than anything else in this world. She would wait. She would plan. And when the moment came, there would be no hesitation. Benjamin Archer would pay for what he had done, and Elena would make sure of it. At this point in the story, you might be asking yourself, did Elena have any other options? Was this really the only way forward for her? After everything she had learned, after seeing her daughter's innocence stolen by the very man who had once been a friend, a mentor, a pillar in her life, could she have walked away? Was there another path for Elena, one that didn't end in violence, in vengeance? Or was there simply no other choice? Was Elena so consumed by the need for justice, for the need to protect her daughter, that the only option left was to take matters into her own hands? After all, what do you do when the system fails you? When the man who should have been a protector turns out to be a predator? How far would you go to right such a wrong? And in Elena's case, was this always going to be the outcome? Think about it for a moment. Could you have done something differently? Could you have taken another route? What would you have done in Elena's shoes, knowing that the law might fail to deliver the justice that your family so desperately needed? Was her act of vengeance truly a last resort, or was there another way? Maybe one that didn't involve risking everything to ensure Benjamin Archer would never hurt anyone again. I want to hear your thoughts. Was Elena justified in her actions? Should she have gone to the authorities? Or do you think there's a line that once crossed, leaves no room for forgiveness? Let me know what you think in the comments below. This is a case that forces you to ask yourself, what would you do if you found yourself in this story, facing a situation where the man you trusted betrayed your family in the most horrific way? What would you choose? Justice by the book, or justice by your own hands? Could you hold your ground, or would anger consume you? I want to hear your opinions. And don't forget, if you're moved by this story, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more thought-provoking true crime stories that will challenge your sense of justice. But the shocking twist didn't stop there. As the days passed, Elena had waited, patiently, meticulously, every action calculated, every detail carefully planned. What Benjamin didn't know, what no one could have possibly imagined, was that Elena had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone had realized. This wasn't just a mother's rage boiling over, it was a plan months in the making. She had been poisoning him, slowly, over the course of weeks. At first it was just small doses, undetectable amounts that barely affected him. A sprinkle of nightshade in his tea, a dash of belladonna in his soup. Benjamin had no idea that every meal he consumed was a ticking time bomb, carefully orchestrated by the woman who once served him with the utmost loyalty. Elena knew that in time, his body would grow weaker, his health would deteriorate, and he wouldn't even understand why. By the time it became too much to ignore, it would be too late. The perfect plan for ultimate revenge. Every moment in that house had been about more than just cleaning or cooking. Elena had been watching, waiting for the perfect opportunity to make Benjamin Archer suffer the way her daughter had. She was a woman pushed to her absolute limit. A mother who had no other recourse. It wasn't just about protecting Sophia anymore. It was about making Benjamin feel the terror of knowing that his fate had already been sealed. And that day came. It was the final meal Benjamin would ever eat. He sat at the table, oblivious to the fact that the very hands that had prepared his dinner were the same ones that had slowly, methodically, plotted his death. The poison in his food had been building for days. He had grown weaker, more sluggish. And yet he had no idea why. He had no idea that Elena had been the one behind it all. She had waited for the moment when the poisoning would finally take its toll, and it did. Benjamin Archer fell to the floor in agony, gasping for breath as the poison began to take full effect. His body was shaking, his throat closing up, and yet there was no one around to save him. Not this time. Not after everything he had done. Elena watched him, not with satisfaction, but with cold resignation, knowing that this was the end. She had taken everything from him. His life, his trust, his empire. In the end, it wasn't just about justice for her daughter. It was about giving Benjamin Archer the suffering he had earned. But here's where it takes an even more twisted turn. As Elena waited for him to collapse, something unexpected happened. Benjamin's breathing began to slow, his pulse weak. But instead of the moment of triumph that Elena had imagined, something felt wrong. The authorities were called, the paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Benjamin was already gone, his life taken in a way that no one could have predicted. But what the police uncovered in the aftermath was even more chilling than Elena could have ever imagined. As the investigation began to unfold, they uncovered a trail of evidence that pointed not just to Elena as the murderer, but to something far more shocking. Elena had been poisoning him for weeks. Every meal, every drink had been slowly sabotaged. And to top it off, Elena had been keeping a journal, documenting each step of the plan. Each page was filled with details: poison quantities, times, days, and meals. It was as if Elena had become a meticulous architect of death. But in the journal, there was something else. Something far more revealing. She hadn't just been planning revenge. She had been preparing for something bigger. He won't be the only one who suffers. In the aftermath of Benjamin Archer's death, the town of Chesterfield was left to pick up the pieces. The once quiet community was now divided. Some saw Elena as a victim, a mother who had been pushed beyond the breaking point, forced to take matters into her own hands when the system had failed her. Others viewed her as a cold-blooded murderer, a woman who had taken a life in the name of vengeance, no matter the cost. To the outsiders, Elena's actions seemed incomprehensible, but to those who had seen the tension in her eyes, who had watched her work so tirelessly for years, there was a chilling understanding. Something had broken within her, something that no amount of patience, no amount of time, could ever heal. For some she was a hero, a mother protecting her daughter. For others, she was a monster, a woman who had let her rage consume her, until there was nothing left but the cold, empty finality of death. And yet in the midst of this division, one thing was clear. Elena had made a choice that could never be undone. There was no going back. Her actions, however justifiable they seemed to some, had forever altered the lives of everyone involved. And as for Sophia, the girl at the heart of it all, the one who had suffered the most, her life was shattered. She had lost her innocence, her sense of safety, and now she was left to rebuild a life that had been torn apart by the most unimaginable betrayal. Would she ever truly recover from what had happened? Could she find peace, knowing that the man who had betrayed her had been taken away by the very hands of her mother? Elena knew the toll this would take on Sophia. But as she sat in that cold, sterile cell, waiting for her trial to begin, she couldn't help but wonder if the price had been worth it. Was justice truly served in the end? Or had Elena traded one tragedy for another? The case, though seemingly closed, left more questions than answers. Was Elena's act of vengeance justified? Could the justice system have done more to prevent such a tragedy? And in the end, who were the true victims? Benjamin Archer, Elena, Sophia, or perhaps it was the community, ripped apart by a single act of violence that no one could have foreseen. And as the trial moved forward, Elena faced the consequences of her actions. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, but there was no sense of triumph in the air, no sense of closure, only the quiet weight of a mother's sacrifice, the cost of a decision made in the heat of rage, and the knowledge that sometimes justice comes at a price that no one is truly ready to pay. Was justice really served? Was there another way? And what happened to the woman who had been pushed too far? Elena's story, like so many others, left behind a trail of unanswered questions, lingering long after the final verdict was read. And perhaps that's the true tragedy in the end. After everything you've just heard, what's your take on this case? Was Elena justified in her actions, or did she cross a line that could never be undone? Was this an act of a mother protecting her daughter? Or did vengeance consume her to the point where she became the very thing she despised? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think she was justified, or do you feel that no matter the betrayal, there's never a reason to take another person's life? Was there another path she could have taken? Or was this always going to be the only way out for her and her daughter? This story leaves so many questions in its wake. Questions about justice, morality, and the cost of revenge. Elena's fate is sealed, but Sophia's future remains uncertain, forever marked by the choice her mother made. What happens next for her? What happens when the lines between right and wrong blur so completely that you can't tell who the victim truly is? If you found this deep dive into a true crime mystery compelling, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more chilling stories just like this one. We bring you the most thought-provoking, heart-wrenching and shocking cases from the world of true crime. The camera focuses on the darkened street outside the house, then pans to the empty windows, as if inviting the audience to reflect on the eerie quiet that now surrounds the place where this tragedy took place. And remember, share this video with your friends if you think they'll want to weigh in on this case. Who knows? Your share might start a conversation that could change the way we all look at justice, revenge, and the lengths we go to when pushed too far. I'll see you in the next video. Stay curious and stay aware. because the next story might just be one you never saw coming.